Welcome to Bent Souls, where real stories come alive, raw, honest, and full of heart. I'm truly grateful you're here with me. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. It's powerful to witness this community growing worldwide, bound together by stories that shake us to our core. If what you hear moves you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Your support fuels these stories that change lives, spark hope, and inspire action. And remember this, no matter how heavy life feels, inside you lies a strength and light that nothing can take away. Let this story awaken that fire within you. Amen. Emily Hart's journey to the new place, steel and glass tower of Larkson Industries, was anything but ordinary. It was the result of countless small battles, quiet sacrifices, and a determination that refused to break. From the very beginning, Emily knew her life would not be handed to her on a silver platter. Instead, it was something she had to reach for with her own hands, to fight for with her own strength. Emily was born in a quiet town where life moved slowly, and dreams often felt just out of reach. It was the kind of place where people knew each other's names, where the streets held memories as much as they held dust, and where opportunities seemed to pass by like trains never stopping. She grew up watching her mother, a single woman who carried the weight of their world, without complaint. Her mother worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs, to keep their home running, to put food on the table, and to provide for Emily as best she could. Though the days were hard and the nights often lonely, Emily never saw her mother give up. There was a quiet pride in her mother's eyes, a steady hope that life would someday be better. From a young age, Emily understood what it meant to fight for every chance, every step forward. She knew that nothing would come easy. She saw the sacrifices her mother made, skipping meals so Emily could eat, working late into the night to pay bills, staying awake when her body begged for rest. These moments taught Emily more than any classroom ever could. They taught her about resilience, about grit, and about the value of never giving in. When Emily was old enough, she made a decision that would change the course of her life. She would leave the familiar streets of her hometown and move to the city. It was a place full of noise, of bright lights, and endless possibilities, but also a place where one wrong move could mean losing everything. The city promised new beginnings, but demanded courage and strength in return. For Emily, it was the chance she had been waiting for, the opportunity to break free from the limitations she'd known all her life. Arriving in the city was both exciting and overwhelming. The tall buildings stretched into the sky like steel giants, and the streets bustled with people who seemed to move faster, speak louder, and carry the weight of their own battles. It was easy to feel small, invisible even, in a place so large and full of ambition, but Emily refused to let fear hold her back. She had her mother's strength inside her, and a determination that would not be denied. Finding work in this new world was not simple. Without connections, without a family name to open doors, Emily faced rejection after rejection. Many days, she returned to her small apartment with a heavy heart and an aching hope that she might finally catch a break. She applied everywhere, from small shops to large offices, taking every interview seriously, learning from each experience, and holding on to her dream like a lifeline. Then, just when it seemed the city might swallow her whole, an opportunity appeared. Larkson Industries, one of the city's most powerful companies, had an opening for a secretary. It was a position that many would consider modest, but for Emily, it was the key to stepping inside a world she had only glimpsed from afar. This was a chance to prove herself, to show that she belonged in a place where power was concentrated and influence was everything. The first day at Larkson Industries was a test of nerves and courage. As Emily walked through the towering glass doors, she felt the weight of her journey, the years of struggle, the moments of doubt, the sacrifices made by her mother and herself. The building's sleek design and polished floors reflected a world so different from the one she'd left behind. It was a world where appearances mattered, and every detail was scrutinized. Emily knew that one mistake here could cost her everything, but beneath her nervousness was a quiet strength, a calm resolve that this was her moment. She was ready to meet the challenge, head on. Her role was demanding from the start. She had to manage schedules, answer calls, organize meetings, and keep the busy office running smoothly. It was a fast-paced environment where efficiency was expected and mistakes were not tolerated. Despite the pressure, Emily adapted quickly. Her sharp mind and attention to detail helped her stay ahead. She learned to anticipate the needs of those around her, to be 2 steps ahead in a place where the pace never slowed. Her calm under pressure made her stand out in an environment where tension often ran high. Colleagues began to notice her reliability, her dedication, and the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. Among those who took notice was Jonathan Cole, a man whose influence in the company was unmatched. Jonathan was known not just for his business acumen, but for his keen eye for talent. When he first observed Emily, he saw more than just a secretary handling tasks. He saw a young woman with intelligence, resilience, and an inner strength that commanded respect. Unlike others who were caught up in ambition and status, Emily's authenticity made her stand apart. Working closely with Jonathan opened new doors for Emily. She began to see the inner workings of the corporate world, the power struggles, the negotiations, the strategic decisions that shaped the future of Larkson Industries. It was a world that demanded both sharp instincts and a steady heart. Emily learned to navigate these complexities, balancing professionalism with her own sense of integrity. But this new world also brought challenges. Emily was often reminded of the fragile line she walked, one where mistakes could be fatal, and trust had to be earned carefully. She had to prove not just her skills, but her character in a place that sometimes valued appearances over substance. The weight of expectations could be heavy, yet she never forgot why she was there, to create a better life, not just for herself, but for her mother, and for the promise of a future she had long dreamed about. Emily's journey was about more than just a job. It was a story of hope and perseverance. It was about breaking free from the chains of circumstance and stepping into the light of possibility. Each day at Larkson Industries was a step forward, a testament to what could be achieved when determination met opportunity. As she stood in the sleek lobby of that towering building, Emily knew this was just the beginning. The path ahead was still full of uncertainty, but with every challenge, she grew stronger. She was no longer the girl from a quiet town with dreams too big to chase. She was a woman shaping her destiny, one deliberate step at a time. Meanwhile, Jonathan Cole was the kind of man everyone thought they understood, a young, ruthless CEO who had clawed his way to the top of the corporate ladder. His name carried weight in boardrooms and among competitors. He was sharp, decisive, and unyielding. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight at Larkson Industries, people saw a leader with a cold edge and a mind that never stopped calculating. But behind the steel and glass walls of his office, behind the carefully crafted image, was a story few knew, a life shaped by loss, betrayal, and the need to protect what was left of a fractured legacy. Jonathan's rise to power was not accidental. It was forged in fire, through trials that would have broken a lesser man. Born into a family with a reputation tarnished by scandal, Jonathan knew early on that his path would not be easy. The Cole name once stood for strength and success, but years of missteps had left it marred. The public whispers, the closed doors, and the constant pressure to prove himself pushed Jonathan into a world where trust was rare, and vulnerability was a luxury he could not afford. His family's downfall was a story he rarely shared. When he was young, secrets unraveled, deals gone wrong, betrayals from within, and the slow crumbling of the empire his ancestors built. The weight of those mistakes settled on his shoulders, shaping the man he became. Every move he made was a step toward restoring what had been lost, every decision measured against the shadow of the past. Jonathan learned quickly that emotion could be used against you. He mastered the art of control, locking away feelings that might expose weakness. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, scanned every room with caution. Behind his calm exterior was a mind always working, analyzing threats, predicting moves, and preparing for the worst. Success in his world required more than business acumen. It demanded a steel heart and a willingness to act without hesitation. At Larkson Industries, Jonathan was both feared and respected. His leadership style was direct and unforgiving. Employees learned that mistakes were costly, and loyalty was non-negotiable. Yet, for all his ruthlessness, Jonathan was deeply aware of the fragility of his position. In the high-stakes world of corporate power, enemies lurked in unexpected places. Rival companies sought to exploit any weakness, regulators looked for reasons to investigate, and internal politics could shift like quicksand beneath his feet. When signs of threats to his company began to surface, Jonathan knew he had to act decisively. Rumors of hostile takeovers and leaks to the press set off alarms. For a man who had rebuilt his life on trust earned and guarded, these were dangers that could unravel everything. He began to tighten security, scrutinize allies, and prepare for battles that were as much about survival as they were about dominance. Despite the walls he built around himself, Jonathan was not immune to the scars of his past. Memories of family betrayals haunted him in quiet moments. The lessons learned through pain had forged his resilience, but also a loneliness few understood. He carried a burden few could see, a need to protect, not just the company, but the fragile remnants of his family's name. In the midst of these pressures, Jonathan's attention was drawn to Emily Hart. Unlike many who passed through the halls of Larkson Industries, Emily moved with a quiet confidence and steady grace. Her intelligence and calm composure in the face of pressure were rare qualities that did not go unnoticed. To Jonathan, she represented something different, not just a capable secretary, but a potential ally in a world where trust was hard to come by. Their interactions began professionally, with Jonathan relying on Emily's keen insight and ability to anticipate his needs. But slowly, an unspoken understanding grew between them. In a place filled with guarded words and hidden agendas, Emily's straightforwardness was a breath of fresh air. Jonathan found himself valuing her presence, sensing a strength beneath her calm that mirrored his own resolve. As Jonathan navigated the growing threats to Larkson Industries, Emily became more than an assistant. She became a part of his strategy to protect what mattered. Together, they moved through the challenges with a shared determination, a quiet partnership forged in the crucible of corporate warfare. Jonathan's story was one of power, control, and survival, but beneath the surface, it was also a story of a man seeking redemption, a man determined to reclaim his legacy and protect the future he had fought so hard to build. In the world of Larkson Industries, where every move was calculated and every emotion guarded, Jonathan Cole stood as both a king and a man, haunted by his past, ready to face whatever came next with unwavering resolve. The city never forgot a scandal, especially when it involved someone like Jonathan Cole, and once whispers began, they spread faster than tidal. It wasn't just gossip, it was a threat, a wildfire poised to reduce a carefully built empire to ash. But before the storm could rage, there had to be a spark. It started quietly, almost too quietly to notice. A message here, a meeting there, small mistakes that seemed harmless in isolation, but in the hands of the wrong people, became ammunition. It was a secret Jonathan had tried hard to bury, a fragment of his past that threatened to unravel everything. One evening in the privacy of a dimly lit room, a conversation took place. Hushed voices, wary glance, a trusted aide inadvertently slipped information to someone outside the inner circle. It was nothing malicious, just a careless collant. But that moment grew into a rumor that found its way into the hands of journalists hungry for a story. The story itself was scandalous, hints of betrayal, whispered accusations of infidelity, and suggestions that Jonathan's judgment was compromised. For a man whose life revolved around control and precision, this was an unforgivable flaw. The media pounced, investors questioned, and the boardroom trembled under the weight of uncertainty. The problem wasn't just the rumor, it was the timing. Larkson Industries was on the brink of a major deal, a deal that would shape the company's future for years. Confidence was everything, and suddenly, that confidence was eroding. Jonathan felt the pressure immediately. Calls flooded in, voices sharp with doubt. Every meeting was a test of his ability to maintain composure, yet inside, he was fighting a battle he could not easily control. In an emergency board meeting, the directors demanded swift action. The risk was too great. The market responded to perception, not truth, and the perception was rapidly turning against them. That's when the idea surfaced, a contract marriage. It was bold, unconventional, and risky, but it promised a way to show stability, to silence the rumors with a public display of commitment, to reassure investors that the man leading Larkson Industries was a man settled, loyal, and trustworthy. The concept was simple in theory: marry someone who could be the perfect partner in the public eye, someone whose presence would put the gossip to rest, without inviting new questions. But the question that followed was difficult. Who? The board brainstormed names. Celebrities, socialites, even old family friends were considered and dismissed. The role required more than just a pretty face. It demanded discretion, loyalty, and a presence that complemented Jonathan's world, without complicating it. Then the answer came quietly: Emily Hart. She was already close to Jonathan, trusted, and reliable. Her demeanor was calm, her loyalty proven. To the board, she was the perfect candidate, someone who understood the stakes, someone who could move seamlessly in elite circles without drawing unwanted attention. For Emily, the proposal was a shock. She had started at Larkson Industries, with hopes of growth and independence, never imagining she would be asked to enter a marriage arranged by corporate necessity, rather than personal choice. She wasn't naive. She understood the power dynamics at play. Yet, when the offer came, it wasn't from Jonathan himself, but from a powerful ally within the company, someone with their own reasons to protect Jonathan's image. Bills were mounting, opportunities felt scarce. The promise of security, even under such complicated terms, was tempting. Emily weighed her options, feeling the walls close in. She could refuse and risk losing everything she'd worked for, or she could accept take control of her fate, even if it meant sacrificing her own desires. Reluctantly, she agreed. The contract was drafted with cold precision. 1 year, no love, no promises, just survival. Their marriage was a performance, a carefully crafted illusion designed to shield Jonathan from the storm and offer Emily a chance to secure her future. Every detail was outlined: appearances at events, the way they would speak publicly, the boundaries they would maintain privately. For Emily, it was a new world of rehearsed smiles, calculated touches, and public scrutiny. The freedom she had once imagined felt distant, replaced by a reality of contracts and control. Jonathan, accustomed to commanding every part of his world, found himself navigating unfamiliar territory. Trust was not given lightly, especially not in a marriage born from necessity. Yet, he respected Emily's strength and discretion. Together, they walked a fine line, partners in survival, bound by duty rather than affection. The year ahead would test them both, challenging their boundaries, their patience, and their understanding of each other. Behind the veil of the contract marriage lay a story of compromise, resilience, and the harsh truths of power, a story that neither had expected, but both had no choice but to live. Had reached its most pivotal moment. The night they signed the contract was unlike any other, a turning point, sealed in ink, charged with tension, and heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Jonathan's office sat on the highest floor of Larkson Industries, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city's glowing skyline. But inside, the grandeur faded beneath an atmosphere thick with anticipation and restraint. The room smelled faintly of aged leather and old books. The familiar scents that usually offered comfort now felt distant and cold. Emily sat across from Jonathan, her fingers curled around a pen, her eyes fixed on the crisp contract laid between them on the polished mahogany desk. The paper was more than a legal document. It was a barrier and a bridge, a symbol of the pact they were about to enter, one born not from love, but necessity. Jonathan's gaze was steady, his face unreadable. Yet Emily caught a fleeting flicker behind his eyes, a shadow of doubt, a hint of regret. She wondered if he questioned this path as much as she did. Her hands trembled ever so slightly as she reached forward, knowing the moment she signed, everything would change. It wasn't just a formality, it was a contract that would bind their lives together in ways neither had imagined. The silence stretched, heavy and full of questions, neither dared voice. How deeply would this contract bind them? Would it protect or imprison? Could they survive a year locked in a facade, pretending to be what they were not? Jonathan broke the silence first, his voice low but firm. "This changes everything." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, it does." She pressed the pen to the paper, the ink flowing like a line drawn between their separate worlds. With that single act, they sealed their fate. Two people connected by a fragile agreement, stepping into a future filled with uncertainty. The days that followed were a dance of appearance. Publicly, Emily and Jonathan played the part perfectly, attending gala dinners, corporate events, and social gatherings side by side, their smiles practiced, and their conversations measured. To the outside world they were the epitome of stability and unity, the perfect couple. But behind closed doors, their reality was starkly different. Emily grappled with the loss of her independence. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, was calculated to maintain the illusion. Freedom felt like a distant memory, replaced by the cold rules of the contract. She missed the simplicity of her former life, the ability to live on her own terms. Jonathan, accustomed to control and command, found himself navigating a new challenge, the vulnerability of sharing his life, even superficially, with someone he barely knew. Trust was a currency he guarded fiercely, and now he had to distribute it carefully, balancing closeness with distance. Yet, amid the tension, a quiet respect blossomed. They saw in each other a shared strength, a mutual understanding of the sacrifices required for survival. Their relationship, though born of necessity, grew into a fragile partnership. As the contract dictated, love and promises were absent, yet human hearts are rarely so simple. In moments of unguarded silence, in fleeting glances, and in the subtle support they offered one another, something more began to stir. The contract marriage was not just a legal arrangement, it was a journey through compromise, resilience, and the complex dance between duty and desire. Each event they attended was meticulously planned, their interactions choreographed to perfection. A smile here, a touch on the arm there, designed to quell rumors and project strength. The public saw a united front. Few glimpsed the toll it took behind the scenes. Emily learned to master the art of deception, not for selfish gain, but to protect herself and Jonathan from the prying eyes that threatened to unravel them both. She became adept at reading the room, anticipating questions, and deflecting suspicion with grace. Jonathan admired her adaptability and strength. In a world where loyalty was scarce, Emily's presence became a rare constant. He found comfort in their shared secret, a silent acknowledgement of the boundaries they both respected. Yet, the contract's terms were clear. 1 year, no love, no promises. They were bound by survival, not affection. The weight of that truth was heavy, a constant reminder of the distance they maintained, even as they stood side by side. As weeks turned into months, the emotional strain grew, the line between performance and reality blurred, leaving both questioning what they truly wanted and needed. Emily wrestled with loneliness, the quiet ache of a life half-lived. She found solace in small moments, a genuine smile from Jonathan, a shared joke, the rare evenings when they simply existed without pretense. Jonathan faced his own battles. The contract forced him to confront emotions he had long buried beneath layers of control. He grappled with the fear of loss, of the company, his reputation, and perhaps, unexpectedly, of Emily. Their journey was not without conflict. Tensions flared in private, fueled by the frustrations of their constrained existence. Yet, through every challenge, they found ways to communicate, to bridge the gap the contract created. The contract marriage was a testament to the complexities of human connection. It was a story of survival, compromise, and the unexpected bonds forged in adversity. For Emily and Jonathan, it was a chapter marked by growth, understanding, and the slow, uncertain emergence of something beyond the paper that bound them. Together, they faced the future, uncertain, challenging, but Jonathan's penthouse was a reflection of the man himself, stark, cold, and carefully guarded. The space stretched wide and open, every surface polished to a mirror-like sheen, yet there was an emptiness that filled the room like a thick fog. Their eyes met, across the vast room, two strangers thrust into proximity by necessity. Jonathan's gaze was steady, but distant, shielded by the armor of his usual composure. Emily's heart fluttered with a mix of apprehension and reluctant resolve. Neither spoke at first. Words felt inadequate for the gravity of what lay ahead. Dinner was served quietly, an arrangement of fine dishes carefully prepared but untouched. They sat opposite each other at the long dining table, a space that felt like a canyon rather than a connection. Conversation was polite, but shallow, filled with neutral topics that skirted around the deeper, more uncomfortable realities. They spoke of schedules, appointments, the city's weather, anything but the contract that had bound them together and the invisible walls closing in. But beneath the surface of this practiced calm, a different story was unfolding. In the stolen glances barely masked by careful avoidance, there was an unspoken dialogue, a tentative reaching out, a hesitant probing of boundaries. Their fingers brushed momentarily, a fleeting touch, electric with meaning neither dared acknowledge aloud. Emily saw behind Jonathan's mask, the loneliness etched into the lines of his face, the burden he carried with silent stoicism. His eyes, often cold and calculating in the boardroom, softened momentarily, revealing a man wounded and wary. She felt a surge of compassion for him, a quiet recognition of the pain they both concealed. Jonathan, in turn, found himself drawn to Emily's quiet strength. There was warmth in her that contrasted starkly with the icy walls he'd built around himself. She wasn't like the others. She carried herself with a dignity-born struggle, an authenticity that unsettled and intrigued him. Her presence was a balm in a world that demanded ruthless calculation. Yet, the fragile peace of their first evening together was shattered by a sudden sharp intrusion. Jonathan's phone rang, slicing through the silence with an urgent insistence. The shadow behind his eyes deepened as he answered, his voice dropping to a hushed, tense tone. A visitor from his past had arrived, bringing with them the potential to unravel the delicate truce carefully constructed between Emily and himself. The conversation was brief but heavy with unspoken threats. Jonathan's face hardened as he ended the call, and Emily sensed the gravity of whatever was unfolding beyond their shared walls. The night stretched on, filled with quiet anxiety and the weight of secrets neither was ready to confront openly. Emily lay awake long after Jonathan had retreated to his thoughts by the window, the city lights casting patterns on the ceiling. The contract they signed promised only survival, yet her heart whispered of something more, fear, hope, and the fragile possibility of connection. Jonathan stared out into the night, haunted by memories and the relentless demands of the world he controlled. The contract marriage was supposed to be a shield, but in its cold confines new vulnerabilities were emerging, walls crumbling in silence. Their first night together was a beginning marked by tension, unspoken emotions, and the uncertain promise of what might come next. They say some secrets refuse to stay hidden. No matter how tightly you try to lock them away, they have a way of slipping through the cracks, waiting for the right moment to come crashing into the light. For Emily Hart and Jonathan Cole, that moment was fast approaching, and when it came, it would change everything. The evening Jonathan received that mysterious phone call was etched into his memory, the cold air of the penthouse, the distant hum of the city below, and the sudden tension that crackled through the room. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent, delivering news that unsettled the fragile balance they'd just begun to build. A visitor from the past was coming, someone who held pieces of a puzzle neither Jonathan nor Emily had yet pieced together. Jonathan had not shared the details with Emily, believing the burden was his alone to carry, but secrets, as they often do, have a way of leaking through the cracks. A few nights later, Emily found herself alone in the penthouse, the silence pressing heavily around her. Jonathan was away on urgent business, his absence filling the room with an unspoken void. Drawn by a growing unease, Emily wandered through the sleek minimalist space, her fingers tracing the cool surface of the mahogany desk. Her eyes caught sight of a locked drawer, a detail she'd noticed but never questioned. Curiosity worried her, fueled by fragments of overheard conversations and the subtle shifts in Jonathan's demeanor. She remembered the phone call, the tension in his voice, the tight grip on the receiver. Something was coming, and she needed to understand what. With trembling hands, Emily found a small key hidden in a desk organizer, a key Jonathan had absent-mindedly left behind during a late-night meeting. The lock clicked open, revealing a trove of documents, letters, and photographs, yellowed with age but alive with history. As she sifted through the papers, a story unfolded, a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and family fractures that reached deep into Jonathan's past. Emily's breath caught as she recognized names, dates, and places that tied her own history to Jonathan's in ways she had never imagined. She discovered that years ago, Jonathan's family had been torn apart by scandal, an incident involving a trusted confidant, a failed business deal, and a personal betrayal that left scars both visible and hidden. Emily's mother had been entangled in that web, a silent witness and unwilling participant, forced to flee and protect her daughter from the fallout. The revelation shattered Emily's world. She realized that her connection to Jonathan was not accidental or distant. It was deeply personal and complicated. The secret she had kept to herself now felt like a ticking time bomb, threatening to explode and destroy everything they had just begun to build. When Jonathan returned, Emily knew she could no longer hide the truth. The weight of the secret pressed on her chest, demanding release. One evening, as the city lights flickered through the penthouse windows, Emily sat across from Jonathan. The documents spread between them like a fragile bridge. Her voice was steady, but soft as she recounted the story, the betrayal, the family divide, her mother's flight, and the silent years filled with pain and longing. Jonathan listened, the usual steel in his eyes replaced by a storm of emotions. Anger, disbelief, sorrow, and a profound sense of loss crossed his face. The man who had built his empire on control and certainty now faced a past he had tried to forget, and a foe that upended his carefully crafted world. Trust, once solid and unwavering, fractured beneath the weight of the revelation. Walls that had protected Jonathan's heart crumbled, exposing wounds he had long buried. For the first time in years, vulnerability seeped through the cracks of his armor. Emily felt the sting of his doubt and pain, but also saw a flicker of something else, an openness, a willingness to confront the past together. The journey ahead was daunting, filled with difficult conversations and fragile steps toward healing. Their relationship, once defined by a contract and convenience, was now reshaped by truth and raw emotion. The facade they had maintained gave way to moments of genuine connection, where honesty replaced pretense. Yet, the path to forgiveness and trust was far from smooth. Jonathan struggled with feelings of betrayal and confusion, questioning whether the foundation of their partnership could survive such upheaval. Emily wrestled with guilt and fear, uncertain if her truth would push Jonathan away or bring them close. In the days that followed, tension and tenderness intertwined. Arguments sparked from misunderstandings, but so did moments of empathy and support. They navigated the delicate dance of rebuilding trust, learning to listen and to be vulnerable. Jonathan began to see Emily not just as the woman tied to his painful past, but as a partner strong enough to face the darkness with him. Emily discovered strength in Jonathan's willingness to confront his fears and open his heart. Together, they forged a new bond, one not born of contracts or secrets, but of courage, understanding, and the fragile hope of love. Their story became a testament to the power of truth, to both wound and heal. As they faced their shared past, Emily and Jonathan stepped into a future uncertain, but filled with possibility, a future where love could grow from the ashes of pain. Despite the cold, formal terms of their contract, something unexpected was stirring between Jonathan and Emily. Between hurried business meetings and whispered arguments behind closed doors, a quiet comfort began to bloom. It was subtle at first, a shared glance here, a fleeting smile there, but with each passing day, the walls they had built around themselves began to soften, and barriers they once held firm started to break. The line between their contractual arrangement and something far more real dangerously. It was an unspoken understanding, a fragile connection forged through shared hardships, vulnerability, and moments of genuine tenderness. Jonathan found himself drawn to Emily's quiet strength, the way she stood steadfast in a world that often tried to pull her under. She was more than the secretary, more than the woman he had agreed to marry on paper. She was becoming his anchor, the one person who could cut through his stoic exterior and reach the man beneath. Emily, too, was feeling the pull. Behind Jonathan's reserved gaze, she glimpsed a man grappling with his own demons, a man who, like her, had been shaped by loss and guarded by walls built to protect a fragile heart. Their shared experiences created a space where they could find understanding, even if the world outside remained harsh and unforgiving. But as their connection grew, so did the dangers surrounding them. Enemies lurked in the shadows, rivals within the company, old family grudges, and whispers of betrayal. Trust, still delicate, was under constant threat. Every smile exchanged was shadowed by suspicion, every touch a gamble. The fragile bond Jonathan and Emily were forging was not yet strong enough to withstand the storms gathering on the horizon. Threats came in subtle ways: a missed call, a secret meeting, a sudden shift in alliances that reminded them both of how precarious their position was. They were caught in a delicate dance, balancing their growing feelings against the cold realities of the contract and the dangers that could unravel everything they'd built. Yet, even in the face of uncertainty, their moments together became a refuge, a place where they could breathe, if only briefly, and dream of a future beyond the shadows. Their journey was no longer just about survival or obligation. It was about the possibility of something more: trust, connection, and the daring hope that love might bloom even amid chaos. Jonathan and Emily's days grew busier. The demands of running a powerful company never ceased. Board meetings, investor calls, and media scrutiny consumed much of their time, leaving little room for personal moments. Yet it was in the spaces between these obligations that their relationship quietly deepened. Late nights at the office brought them together over shared cups of coffee, the glow of computer screens casting soft light on tired faces. Conversations once limited to business began to wander into personal territory. Small disclosures about childhood memories, hopes, and fears. They laughed softly at inside jokes, found comfort in silence, and learned the unspoken language of companionship. Their arguments, though infrequent, were intense, born not of malice but frustration and fear. Sometimes the weight of the contract and the secrets they kept pressed too hard, causing cracks to appear, but even then, the foundation beneath their relationship remained, a fragile but real connection that neither wanted to lose. Jonathan's usually stern demeanor softened when he was with Emily. He let down his guard, allowing himself to be vulnerable in ways he had never before. Emily saw the fatigue behind his sharp gaze and offered quiet support without judgment. Her presence was a balm, reminding him that he did not have to face the world alone. Emily, who had long fought to protect herself, found safety in Jonathan's steady presence. She allowed herself to lean on him, to share her doubts and dreams in moments of rare honesty. Their contract marriage, though still binding, began to feel less like a cage and more like a partnership, imperfect but growing stronger. Yet, danger was never far. Competitors watched their every move, waiting for the moment to strike. Internal betrayals stirred beneath the surface, and the fragile trust between Jonathan and his allies was tested again and again. Rumors and schemes threatened to undo the progress Jonathan and Emily had made. Emily sensed the growing tension, the whispered warnings carried on the wind. She knew that their bond, as much as it meant to them, was a target. Trust was a precious commodity in their world, easily broken and hard to rebuild. Jonathan too felt the pressure mount. The weight of leadership, family expectations, and the need to protect Emily pressed heavily on his shoulders. But amidst the chaos, he found a reason to fight harder, a reason rooted in the woman beside him. Their relationship was a delicate balance of risk and hope. Every shared moment was a victory, every smile a small rebellion against the forces seeking to pull them apart. They navigated the treacherous path between obligation and desire, learning to trust each other in a world that offered little security. One evening, after a long day of negotiations and crises, Jonathan and Emily found themselves alone in the penthouse. The city lights twinkled below, but inside, the space was warm with quiet companionship. They sat together on the sofa, exhaustion softening their usual formality. Jonathan reached out, hesitating, then gently took Emily's hand. The contact was electric, a silent promise that despite everything, they were in this together. Emily looked up, meeting his gaze. There was a softness there that spoke louder than words, a vulnerability he rarely showed. In that moment, the distance between contract and love narrowed. But even as they shared this fragile peace, the shadows remained, a whispered warning from a trusted ally, a reminder that enemies watched and waited. Trust, though growing, was still fragile, and danger loomed. Jonathan and Emily knew their journey was far from over. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, yet, in each other, they had found a strength that neither had expected, a strength born of chaos, hope, and the quiet courage to believe in something real. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was about the possibility of love in a world where trust was rare and every moment had to be earned. Together, they faced the future, united, challenged, but ready to fight for the fragile bond they had forged. But nothing could prepare them for the storm that was about to descend on Larkson Industries. Jonathan Cole had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing prepared him for the sting of betrayal from within his own company. Larkson Industries, the empire he had built with determination and grit, was under attack, not from rivals outside, but from people he once trusted deeply. The betrayal began quietly, almost imperceptibly. Small decisions made behind closed doors, whispered conversations in shadowed corners, and the subtle shifting of allegiances. It was a slow poison seeping through the veins of the company, threatening to choke the life out of everything Jonathan had worked so hard to create. At the center of this storm was Marcus Raines, Jonathan's longtime chief operating officer. Marcus had been with Larkson Industries for over a decade, a man who had earned Jonathan's trust through years of loyal service. To the outside world, he was the rock of the company, a steady hand guiding day-to-day operations. But beneath that loyal facade, Marcus harbored resentment and ambition. Marcus believed he was entitled to more power, more control, more recognition. Over the years, he had watched Jonathan rise to the top, seemingly untouchable, while he remained in the shadows. The whispers of dissatisfaction grew louder in Marcus's mind, twisting into plans to seize the power he felt was rightfully his. Secretly, Marcus began forging alliances with rival companies and discontented board members. He fed them insider information, plans, financial weaknesses, strategic moves, all carefully calculated to weaken Jonathan's position. He orchestrated leaks to the media, painting Jonathan as reckless and unfit to lead. His aim was clear: to destabilize Larkson Industries and force Jonathan out. The impact was swift and devastating. The company's stock price plummeted as investors panicked. Contracts were delayed or cancelled. Key partners reconsidered their alliances. Within the walls of Larkson Industries, fear and suspicion took hold. Employees whispered of uncertainty and doom. Jonathan was blindsided. The man he had trusted as a brother had turned into a covert enemy. The betrayal cut deeper than any corporate attack, because it was personal. It shook the very foundation of his confidence, and threatened to unravel the empire he had built from nothing. The emotional toll was immense. Jonathan felt anger burning beneath his composed exterior. He wrestled with disbelief and hurt. How could Marcus betray him? Why had he hidden his true intentions so well? The man who once stood beside him was now plotting his downfall. Emily watched Jonathan struggle. She saw the cracks in his armor, the moments when his stoic mask faltered. But she also saw a fire, a determination to fight back. She was no longer just a secretary or contract partner. She was his ally in this battle. Together, they devised a plan. It was a careful, strategic response, one that required patience, precision, and courage. Emily used her position to gather information, uncovering more about Marcus's dealings and alliances. She worked late into the night, connecting dots and piecing together the extent of the betrayal. Jonathan began rallying his loyalists within the company. He rebuilt trust with key executives and board members, sharing the truth and exposing Marcus's treachery. He reached out to law enforcement and legal experts to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The battle was as much psychological as it was corporate. Marcus struck with every tool at his disposal: smear campaigns, false accusations, and attempts to undermine Jonathan's credibility. But Jonathan, supported by Emily and his loyal team, stood firm. There were moments of doubt and fear. Board meetings grew tense. The media circled like vultures, and whispers of resignation filled the halls. Yet, through it all, Jonathan and Emily's bond grew stronger. They found solace in their partnership, drawing strength from each other when the world seemed to be collapsing. The climax came during a critical shareholders' meeting. Jonathan presented evidence of Marcus's betrayal: emails, recorded conversations, and financial irregularities. The proof was irrefutable. Shock rippled through the room, As the board members realized the depth of Marcus's deception, Marcus's allies abandoned him one by one. The company rallied behind Jonathan, their confidence restored, legal action was swift, and Marcus was removed from his position and held accountable for his actions. In the aftermath, Larkson Industries began to heal. The crisis, though painful, served as a catalyst for renewal. Jonathan implemented stricter oversight and rebuilt a culture of transparency and loyalty. For Jonathan and Emily, the ordeal forged their relationship anew. They had faced the darkest hour together and emerged stronger. The fragile love that had begun to grow was now tempered by trust earned in fire. Their story was no longer just about survival or convenience. It was about fighting for what mattered together. There is a peculiar kind of magic that happens when two people, bound not by fate but by circumstance, find themselves standing at the edge of something neither expected, a love that begins in the quiet spaces between chaos and hope, between whispered fears and stolen moments. Jonathan Cole, a man forged by ambition and tempered by pain, had lived his life behind walls of control and solitude. Emily Hart, once just a secretary with guarded eyes and a quiet strength, had become the steady heartbeat in his tumultuous world. Their marriage, once a contract sealed by necessity, was transforming into a union of trust and tenderness. But the transformation was not instant. It was a slow, delicate unfolding that required courage, patience, and a willingness to face vulnerability. It was on an ordinary evening, one of those nights when the city below pulsed with a million lives, unaware of the drama unfolding high above, that their story truly began to change. Jonathan had just finished a grueling day of meetings and damage control. The battles they had fought to save Larkson Industries had left them exhausted, but victorious. The betrayal that nearly destroyed everything had been exposed, and justice was finally being served. Yet, despite the relief, the weight, months of stress pressed heavily upon them both. Emily was waiting in the penthouse living room, the soft glow of the lamps casting gentle shadows across the room. She looked up as Jonathan entered, fatigue etched in the lines of his face, but also something new, a softness in his gaze. When he saw her, without a word he crossed the room and sat beside her. Their fingers found each other, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. In that silent touch was a promise, a recognition of the journey they had shared, and the hope for what lay ahead. Jonathan's voice broke the quiet, low and sincere. "Emily, I don't know where I'd be without you, not just as my partner in this company, or this contract, but as the person who stood by me when I needed it most." Emily smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes and lit up her face. "We've both been through a lot, but I believe in us, in what we can build together." The moment hung between them, charged with emotion and possibility. Then slowly, Jonathan leaned in, his lips brushing hers, in a kiss that was both gentle and full of meaning. It was a kiss that spoke of healing, of trust rebuilt, and love blossoming in the most unexpected place. Emily responded with equal warmth, her hands rising to cradle his face, as they lost themselves in the connection they had long denied. The kiss deepened, breaking down the last barriers of doubt and fear. It was a beginning, tender and powerful all at once. When they finally parted, their foreheads resting against each other, a profound peace settled over them. The contract, once a cold obligation, had given way to something real and beautiful, a partnership forged, not just in survival, but in love. In the days that followed, Emily found herself reflecting, often on her mother, the woman whose strength and sacrifices had shaped so much of who she was. Though her mother had passed before she could witness Emily's transformation, her spirit was a guiding light. Jonathan, too, carried memories of his own family, complex, painful, but foundational. Together they honored the past, without letting it dictate their future. In quiet moments, they spoke of their histories, sharing stories that wove their lives closer. Their home, once a place of silence and distance, now echoed with laughter and shared dreams. They explored the city hand in hand, discovering new favorite spots and creating memories that belonged only to them. Their relationship deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Trust grew, not overnight,
but through daily acts, listening, supporting, forgiving, and showing up, Jonathan learned to soften, to show vulnerability without fear. Emily embraced the joy of being seen and loved wholly. Challenges still came, old wounds resurfaced, pressures of work remained, but they faced them as a team, stronger together than apart. Friends and colleagues saw the change. The couple, once bound by contract, was now visibly united by love and respect. Their story inspired those around them, a beacon of hope, that love could indeed grow in unexpected places. They dreamed of a future together, one filled with possibilities. Travel plans were made, homes were discussed, and the idea of family was no longer a distant hope, but a tangible goal. They spoke openly of their fears and hopes, knowing that together, they could face whatever came next. Jonathan's heart, once guarded and distant, was now open. Emily's spirit, once cautious and restrained, was free to soar. Together, they had rewritten their story, not as two people thrown together by circumstance, but as partners choosing to build a life united by love. The contract was forgotten, but its legacy remained, in the strength they found in each other, and the journey they took to get there. Their story was a testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways love can grow.
And so Jonathan and Emily stepped into their new beginning, hand in hand, ready to face the world, not as individuals bound by obligation, but as a couple bound by heart. Thank you for being part of something truly unforgettable today. Your presence here means more than you know. This is where powerful stories come alive and real connections are made. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us your thoughts and where you're watching from. Let's make this space feel like home, no matter where you are in the world. If this story stirred something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button and subscribe to Bent Souls. Joining us means stepping into a community that celebrates every story, every struggle, every triumph. Your subscription fuels the stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us all that we're never alone in this journey. Remember, your story matters just as much as these, no matter how big or small. Stay hopeful, stay strong, and keep believing in the power of love and resilience. So comment, like, subscribe, and let's grow this family bigger and stronger every single day. Because here at Bent Souls, it's not just about watching stories, it's about living them together.